Right, okay, this one's just a bit of fun. It's finishing off the VIC-20 emulation case that I did previously. It was designed to see if we could build a Commodore 64 or an emulator 64 that would do the same as the C64 Maxi, or the C64 as it's called. And you know, I kind of think it did, and I thought it did a little bit more, but it wasn't quite finished. If you watch my previous video, it got to a point where it would emulate 4 different machines and it wasn't quite finished. And that all that was left to do was the case, or the casing. So this is where we are at the moment. And what I've done, as you can see, we've changed it a little bit. We've also changed 1 or 2 bits inside the machine just a little bit to make it a bit more usable and a bit more easier to use this machine for other things as well. And it was just to finish off because you know, we left it as a working machine which did what I set out to do, but the case was horrible. The SD card, how you got into it via the Pi, was a bit fiddly, and opening and closing the case wasn't brilliant. So you've done something about that to make it better. Some people are going to start saying, but why have you done this to a VIC-20? And why not? At the end of the day, it was a Commodore VIC-20 that was bound for the skip. It had come to the end of its life, it was beyond repair, and it was going to head to the local refuse centre or recycle place, or just be languished somewhere in a cupboard and forgotten about. So it's not that anymore. It's a machine that's able to be used, a machine that's able to do a lot more functions than the original machine ever could, and it's a machine that you can use on a daily basis if you want to go through your software or try out a Commodore 64 or 128 or a VIC-20 or a Plus 4 or a C16 and so on. So it's turned out to be quite a nice machine, quite a useful machine. So let's see how we finish this machine off to get it to where it is. Okay, so today we're going to come back to the VIC-20 emulator machine that we did previously, and what I'm going to do is we're going to finish off the case and make it a little different. So the first thing is we're going to take it apart. Okay, so I've unscrewed the keyboard and disconnected the LED wire, and the top of the case is free. The keyboard's going to sit in the space in the bottom of the case, and I'm literally going to mask the whole unit off because I don't really want to disturb all of the wiring that's already been done on this, because it was a bit of a nightmare to do originally, but as you can see there's a USB 2 hub there as well. So, but we're going to add in another component as well once the case has been painted, an extender for the SD card to come to the outside of the case, so it makes it easier to change cards. But on second thoughts I decided to strip it and take the chance anyway, because it made it easier to basically mask off the case for the Pi and then just leave it as a blank space. So that's how I'm going to do it. And this is your stripped Commodore VIC-20 case, soon to be turned into a nice solid silver. So let's see how it looks. Okay, so this is the first coat, and again it's just had a plastic primer on it, and now it's just having this time again a rattle can silver. So very light coat. And again, after the results I had with the Atari, I'm quite happy using this kind of paint for plastics, as long as it's been plasticized beforehand. So it's just on to its final coat now to give it a shine. one nicely painted VIC-20 case. Okay, so now reassembling the bottom half. I've put in the controller board, the USB ports, and left my extension cable here so if I can use this as a USB keyboard if I want to. And I'm just going to basically plug it all back together and then take the masking tape off of the Raspberry Pi cover. One addition I want to add is this. It's to use full-size SD cards from a Raspberry Pi instead of the micro SD card, so I can chop and change it and use it as a different emulator as I feel like it, rather than having to dismantle the machine to get a micro SD card in that slot. So from the back of the machine you can access the card slot, and if you want to change it, just a case of popping it out and swapping the other one, and then that's it. Okay, so now all that's left is to screw it all together and make it one unit again. It's roughly in place, so I'm just going to start screwing the keyboard back together into here, and then we're going to see what it looks like once it's assembled and see if it works the way it should do as well, or still works. Let's hope I haven't upset too much on the machine itself. And there we have it, a Commodore VIC-20 case which has been refurbished because it was in a bit of a state. It was an empty case, which is now a useful machine which can emulate not just the Commodore range, the VIC-20, 64, 128 plus 4, C16. It can also emulate just about every other machine because it's got access to an SD card on the back, which I can then use it to emulate any other machine I feel like it, whether it's an Amiga, Atari ST, a Sinclair Spectrum, and so on and so on. So it gives you the retro feel of the machines of the era, but it's much more reliable and probably more usable than a old Commodore VIC-20 really is. But at the end of the day, it's preference. I mean, this machine was designed to go in the bin, or destined to go in the bin, because it was dead, been dead for years, damaged case, and so on and so on. So, you know, if you can rescue these things, it's always nice to be able to do that and give them another purpose. So let's take a closer look at the final product. I mean, you have the power emblem all embossed on there, which is still shining through. You have the vents and the original Commodore VIC-20 logo. You have a nice shiny case, still with the original moulding marks that were in these cases. They took this case and used it on the C16 later on, and you know, they weren't brilliant. There's a nice keyboard which is very nice and tactile, and the machine looks $1 million compared to what it used to. So I'd say that was quite a successful use of a machine that would have ended up in landfill. And that's what it's all about. It's reusing and re-teching machines and parts to make them useful rather than just throwing them away. Okay, so this is the emulated Commodore 64 running, and as you can see, the little LEDs working in the top corner, which is nice, and we have an intro running. I'm actually a bit surprised that Commodore didn't do a silver version of one of these to start off with, because you know, their colours were quite muted, and I know it was the time, a lot of things were beige, but you know, Tandy, Radio Shack did a silver TRS-80, and you know, the Mattel Aquarius wasn't beige, it was beige and blue. And so, you know, I mean, it's you know, it would have been nice if they had a little bit of thought, because it would have saved a lot of problems with the old yellowing that we get now, and mottling of cases. But I'm sure that they didn't think about what was going to happen 35 years or 40 years on. So I'm quite glad this machine's back together now, and you know, it's a now finished. It's what I originally envisaged for this machine anyway. So what I'm going to do is run you through something else that this machine can emulate, and then we'll go from there. Okay, and with a simple change of an SD card, we have a TI-99 4A, which is quite cool because it's sort of retro in appearance and feel, so it does kind of suit, you know, using a retro emulator with access to hundreds of Texas Instruments TI-99 4A games. And I bet you'd never think of seeing Jet Set Willie running on a Texas Instruments TI-99 4A, let alone a Commodore VIC-20 style machine either. And here we go. How about a Sinclair ZX81? And here we have Rock Crush running on a ZX81. How about an Amstrad CPC 464? And here we have a Amstrad CPC 464 running Back to Reality. The iconic RoboCop. And how about just Retro Pi? Okay, this is an Amiga game and RoboCop. And of course the Sinclair Spectrum. And of course your Amiga 500 workbench. But to be honest, the Commodore 64 has some of the best sounding games ever produced, especially for the 8-bit era. And it was something the likes of the Sinclair Spectrums and other machines, including the Texas Instruments, the MSX, the Oric machines, really had to compete with, and they never ever got the same kind of sound as a Commodore 64 ever got. And that's quite startling when you think we had to wait for the likes of the Amiga, etc., and then the PCs to catch up to what the Commodore 64 was producing in 1982-83. Okay, and so you can see the machine was finished off quite nicely. It was using basic paints again, because when I did the Atari ST one, I used a spray gun, the original Atari ST restoration on the case, and then I was asked about the paint, so I got a close as match as possible using off-the-shelf paint. And it came out really well, and I figured there wasn't really a lot of cause to go down the route of getting that spray compressor, a spray gun, mixing the paint up and so on, if you could find something close. Well, this didn't have to be close. This was paint that I used was for a Mercedes car. It was for the bumpers. It was already plasticized, and it was designed to go on bumpers. So what I did is I thought, why not use it on this? Because silver, I quite like silver. It's kind of retro-y 70s kind of vibe, and This certainly looks almost like a TRS-80 in these kind of colours, especially the Model 1. And I thought, why not, let's do that. So plasticizing the original case and respraying it doesn't take long, and if you take your time and do 3 or 4 light coats, it comes out a nice even coat. You couldn't really tell it was painted if you hadn't seen it before. And the machine turned out really well. It turned out very useful as well, and I find this machine a lot more useful than a common or garden 64 or VIC-20 or even a +4 or a C16 for that matter, simply because it can be used for a lot of other things, and it makes it more and more useful. The addition of the full-size SD card in the back was brilliant. It is a great thing. If you've got a Raspberry Pi, please get rid of your micro SDs unless you're just using it as one thing, and put in a full-size SD card, simply because if I grab one from here, you can label them, write on them, use them, and you know what they are, rather than this tiny little thumbnail card that's in the bottom of it. And you know, that's my preference, which is why I went down this route. But also I can use this as a ZX Spectrum. I can use it as an emulate a Commodore Amiga. Yeah, so it's much more eminently useful, and I like these. I like taking something that was basically ready for the rubbish bin, ready for the garbage dump, or whichever way you're going to say it, depends on, you know, if you're across the pond or not. And I like putting them right, you know, making use of something that should not be useful. And this, to do this, is a great thing, which is why, you know, we call retech. That's the whole point of the channel as well. It's to basically cover what was done in the past, what machines were done, how they were used, were they used for education, or do they have a use today, and can we reuse them today and reuse parts or bits or even whole units to make something that's usable in the 21st century and going forward. Now, because it's got modern innards in it, it's going to last a long time. It's going to last a lot longer than a VIC-20 would. It's going to last a lot longer than a Commodore 64 would. So from that point of view, it's a success. A lot of people are going to say, well, is emulation really the right way to go? Why couldn't you have got a motherboard and put it in the case, and so on and so on? But if I'm going to go down that route, I'm going to start off with a better case. I'm going to start off with a machine that wasn't so trashed. I'm going to start off with a machine that, you know, didn't need as much work, either cosmetically or electronically. And there is a point where you have to go, no, that's enough. We need to do something else with it. And this is where it is, and it's a great addition. The look, the feel, and the use of this machine as a Commodore 64, VIC-20, Commodore 16 is, you can't get away from it. It's just the same way you would look at the original hardware, with the added bonus of you're able to instantly load the software, have it all stored in one unit, make it work. No hunting around for cassette tapes or floppy disks that are long past their best. And that's one of the reasons why emulating machines going forward is a great idea, especially if you can use original casings and original design. I think that's the only thing that we kind of miss from emulation, is the original design. Now, that's where the Commodore 64 Maxi, or the C64, was, in my mind, was a brilliant hit, because not only did it emulate the original design in modern plastics and modern components, it emulated the actual machine to a T. So, you know, it would do a VIC-20 or a Commodore 64, which was brilliant. And I'm sure somebody's going to do an update to let it emulate a Commodore 16 if, you know, they want to do that route. And that's brilliant, because that machine as a machine's going to outlast Commodore 64, genuine 64s and 16s and VIC-20s. And that's where I was coming from with this. I hope you enjoyed this episode about emulation and how to reuse an old computer that was long past its best, or dead, or dying, or beyond repair. And I hope you subscribe, and I hope to see you on this channel shortly. Okay, so thanks for your time, thanks for watching, thank you.